Welcome to the Urbanist Agenda, the podcast that would prefer that trucks weren't in European cities, and we have a good place for them. I am Jason from Not Just Bikes, and I'm joined again by Stef from the YouTube channel Build the Lanes. Welcome back.
Thanks so much for having me. Yes, let's get all those pickup trucks that make our cities more dangerous, and let's put them into a war zone where they can actually save lives instead of costing lives, which is today's motto.
Yeah, so this is really kind of interesting. Obviously, you and I met because you are an American who moved to the Netherlands. You were a traffic engineer, or you studied traffic engineering there, and you worked as a transportation engineer here in the Netherlands. And that is your YouTube channel, Build the Lanes. If you're listening to this and you haven't seen Build the Lanes, you'd probably enjoy it. It's a very good channel that goes into a lot more of the details of Dutch transportation engineering. But we're not here to talk about that necessarily. We're here to talk about your newer project, what was a side project and it was now becoming your thing. And that is helping out in Ukraine. So tell us a little bit about what it is that you're doing right now with these pickup trucks.
Sure, absolutely. So I have to kind of zoom out a little bit here. So there is an umbrella organization that is called NAFO. So maybe a lot of people listening know the word NATO, right? The North Atlantic Treaty Organization. And NAFO is a play on words of that, and it stands for the North Atlantic Fellas Organization. And NAFO was kind of this Twitter handle that started because when the war began, actually I should say it escalated because the war began in 2014, there is a war being fought online right now where there are a lot of people being paid to spread as much disinformation as possible. And maybe a slight segue, we're kind of seeing the consequences of that, all that disinformation being spread in the United States right now. And there were people who started to try to fight back against this disinformation online back in 2022 about what was actually going on, what they thought was going to happen. And these group of kind of like online warriors started to informally call themselves NAFO. And within a few months of the war escalating, they started to collaborate with each other and think like, how can we actually make a difference on the ground instead of just being online? So
there were a lot of memes going around, and I know the NAFO guys were incredibly silly at the beginning.
Yeah. Everyone got little Doge dogs too. You could customize your own character.
Yeah, it was ludicrous. And there was also a lot of disinformation about them as well, presumably being spread by Russians, but there was a lot of like nasty things being said about NAFO too.
Yeah, we would joke about because the Russian propagandists were talking about how NATO troops were on the ground in Ukraine. They said, well, there's no NATO troops in Ukraine, but there are NAFO fellas in Ukraine that are helping, and we will gladly take credit for that. So yeah, all these guys kind of came together, and there are people who formed their own groups, and one of them formed in the Estonian startup accelerator, which is called the Lift 99, and they made an organization called Help 99, which is all about taking this material in places like Estonia and the Baltics and Sweden and getting it to the soldiers directly in Ukraine.
Right.
Now, the group is informally known as the 69th Sniffing Brigade.
I mean,
and you gotta love the internet,
this
right?
Is the memers here, yeah.
Exactly.
Memers have taken control of the world.
Yes, and we actually have like these patches that, the patches where your military unit is identified. We have a 69th Sniffing Brigade patch, and it's of a Doge dog with like a military hat. He's got a grenade in one hand and a drone in the other. And we actually give them to the Ukrainian military, and they actually wear it themselves sometimes. We like to trade patches and things like that. But anyway, to get back to your question, so the real focus point for the 69th Sniffing Brigade is mainly trucks. So what they do is they fundraise for trucks, and they buy used trucks all over Europe. And they take these trucks to Tallinn, where they will fix them up and they will try to equip them for military purposes. And then in addition to that, they will also try to get civilian drones, because drones are a big part of the war in Ukraine. And then sometimes like miscellaneous equipment like radios or like little care packages and things like that. And it kind of just started as this kind of 1 or 2 time thing where people just gathered material and aid together, and they would just drive to Kiev and try to figure out like who it would go to. And then it got such a positive response that they just kind of kept doing it. And then as they kept doing it, the process kind of got more and more formal. They got direct connections to the Ukrainian military. And so now how it works is that there is usually at least one convoy a month that goes between Estonia and Ukraine. And up to this point, I think they've delivered over 600 trucks.
Wow.
By now, thousands of drones, hundreds of radios. It's estimated that each truck can save somewhere between 30 to 50 lives. So if you multiply that by 600 trucks, even though we're not a big government with a huge amount of resources, there's still quite an impact being had over there. And that's what they do in a nutshell.
All right. So, okay. I mean, there's a lot to unpack there, to be honest. That's like really incredible that like people, just individuals, can put this kind of thing together that can make such a difference. Tell us a little bit about like these trucks. Well, what kind of truck? Are there any particular trucks they look for? And why is it that these trucks are important when, governments are already throwing billions of euros and dollars into equipment in Ukraine?
Yeah, sure. So what we end up producing is what we call the NAFO 2.0. And it's a truck that has camouflage or is painted black, so it fits in nighttime. It has drone jammers on it. So there's an extra power station that is rigged to the truck that powers these jammers. So the idea is that if a enemy drone tries to hit the truck with an explosion, the jammer will stop the signal and make them fall out of the sky before they hit the truck. There's night vision installed on it because a big problem is that you don't want your headlights on when you're driving at night, so it's really important to have that. And then also we just have extra things like these trucks come with like extra mud tires, so the trucks can just keep driving without any maintenance problems. And yeah, they get used for all kinds of purposes, from infill, exfil, medical evacuation. I even know a unit that they welded a machine gun to the back of it, and it got used as an air defense station to take down Iranian drones that were on their way to bomb a Ukrainian city. That's a really interesting unit to follow, actually. But yeah, sorry, your other question was, I lost track of your other question there.
Yeah,
Sorry.
so the other question is like, governments are putting billions of dollars into equipment for Ukraine, billions of euros. So what niche do these trucks fill here if, there's already so much equipment going to Ukraine? Why are these trucks important at all?
Gotcha. So that has a lot to do with organizations focusing on what they're really good at. So you have European governments and they're focusing on the big ticket items like air defense systems that can take down ballistic missiles, tanks, armored vehicles, Starlink terminals, really the really big expensive gear that Ukraine also needs. And that's not really something that a civilian organization can really provide at scale. Even though there are sometimes charities that will like fundraise enough to buy some like a Black Hawk helicopter or something like that. But that's really something more for the governments to do.
Right.
But an unfortunate kind of consequence of that is that it's often missed that there's all these other needs. So for example, things like tourniquets. If you guys don't know what a tourniquet is, that's something that you wrap around your leg or your arm where you have a very severe injury and you need to completely block off blood flow so you can not bleed out. And there's a huge need for tourniquets, for example. And that's something where a private organization could step in. Or, for example, like what we do, just sending vehicles. Governments like Germany or France, they're sending billions of dollars of equipment, but they're not necessarily sending like tens of thousands of used cars that used to be in government service or used to be just in regular civilian use. And these are basically dual purpose items that are always in short supply because this type of equipment is always being lost. And so that's why we chose to focus on that, because we thought, okay, the big governments, they can focus on the really big ticket military equipment, and then we can mass fundraise and just flood Ukraine with hundreds of pickup trucks. Then we'll keep doing it until it's necessary. And then the tertiary benefit of all that, Jason, is that it's going to make our cities safer because, I had to watch that one video you made about like how pickup trucks are ruining our cities. And I saw your video where you pretended to buy a pickup truck. And so like every used truck that we buy, that's one truck we're taking off of Europe's streets and really putting it in an environment that it belongs. So for me, the cherry on top was that I thought it was very like nice connection to the work that I'm already involved with, which is trying to make it so like we never have any more traffic deaths in our cities. So it kind of just seemed like a perfect side hobby to kind of segue into and then let it kind of turn into my main quest over time.
Yeah, that's really something that you're taking pickup trucks off the streets in Europe to send them somewhere where they're better suited for what they do. And these trucks are typically used trucks, you said. But I think you mentioned there was something very funny that they do in Latvia, I think it is.
Yeah. So this is great. Latvia has an initiative where if you're caught driving drunk in Latvia and you're a repeat offender, this is actually a thing that many governments do, is that if you're a repeat offender, they will confiscate your vehicle from you. But Latvia goes a step further. Not only will they confiscate your vehicle, they will then use your vehicle and they will donate it to the Ukrainian army. Because they say, well, you lost your vehicle and, we'd rather not have to deal with the costs of impounding it and holding it, so we're just going to donate it. And your vehicle is probably going to get blown up, but you're not going to get it back anyways. But yeah, maybe you shouldn't have driven drunk.
My God, that is insane. Drive drunk, get your vehicle impounded and sent to Ukraine.
Yes. But, also, I just remember you asked me about some of the different types of vehicles they have. And
yeah,
this is an interesting overlap with the Netherlands, because in the Netherlands, we're seeing more and more of these like Ram trucks, the really big black Ram trucks.
Yeah.
That's actually not a truck we use in the program that I've seen yet, because we have preferred models of trucks like the Toyota Tacomas.
And the Hilux, I imagine.
Yeah, some VW trucks. And what I figured out is just that the Ram trucks just don't perform well enough, where we're like, well, we're concerned about survivability, right?
Well, I will say I rented one of those Dodge Ram trucks for my 1,000,000 subscriber videos where I pretended to buy a truck. And that truck is a piece of shit.
Yeah.
Like, it's a piece of shit vehicle. I mean, as soon as you get in it, you realize everything inside is made of cheap plastic. But as soon as you drive it, it doesn't drive well either. Like, they're just terrible, terrible vehicles. And I don't know why anybody would, like, you have to be seriously propagandized and marketed to think that one of those trucks is a good idea to drive around a city. They're just shit. They're absolute shit vehicles. And so I'm not surprised that for your purposes, you prefer Toyota.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is like, a lot of this is just marketing masculinity. I'm like, guys, if the Ukrainian army, which is fighting for its country's survival, looks at your vehicle and says, your vehicle is a piece of shit, it's not good enough for us, you really need to start taking a closer look at yourself, because, if the Ukrainian army is not willing to receive it, right, and they're willing to take a lot of old and bad equipment, like, that really tells you something there. But we also, it's not actually just trucks we bring, so we also like to bring vans as well. Oh, yeah. I know you have a strong preference for vans over trucks, Jason.
I think vans are generally more useful than pickup trucks.
Yes, and they're actually used as drone buses. So they'll turn the van and they'll have like 50 or 60 drones into them. That's how they deliver drones to frontline units. And we also sometimes will convert to these pickup trucks or vans into ambulances.
Right.
Also, that's kind of a sub-niche where they redesign the whole back space and then it serves as a kind of like evacuation vehicle if they need one.
So you have driven these vehicles down to Ukraine a couple of times, right?
Yes. As of January, I have been to Ukraine 4 times now. Oh, wow. So I've brought 4 vehicles.
How's that experience? You start in Estonia, I guess it is?
Yeah. So I can't reveal too much specific information,
of course,
for operational security, but I can kind of speak generally. So the convoy, does start in Estonia. We leave in the let's just call it early morning hours usually. And it's a nonstop shot to Kyiv, where you're driving for around 2 days. And one aspect of this is that the convoy does not stop for extended period of times, partially for operational security, because the Kremlin has agents all over Europe, and we would really prefer not to have our location tracked by people. So we found that having consistent movement and speed is one of your best defenses against something like that. And usually there are 2 people driving every vehicle. And then, so it usually takes somewhere between 35, 36, 40 hours sometimes, just depending on how lucky you are. And you get to see a large variety in the quality of roads of Europe. So you start in the Baltics, their economy is growing, they're becoming more wealthy, but there's still a bit of a Soviet legacy there. And you can kind of see the evidence of that sometimes. Then you go into Poland, where I will actually say the Polish roads are very good, especially the highways. Much safer, I would say, than a lot of the American highways. But every once in a while, you'll go through a town, and it reminds you a little bit of the U.S. Like, I remember there's one place where we would stop, and there's like a McDonald's. If it was not for the traffic signs, and you did not know where you were, you would think you were in the United States. Yeah. Like, it's a strode environment. Jason, I would not recommend this place for one of your many Euro trips. I know you've been pretty much everywhere in the world, but you can skip this one.
Or, maybe it's the perfect place to go to give that side of Europe. I am familiar with Poland. I've been there many, many times myself, including to some of the smaller towns. And I also worked for a company that had an office there as well. So I have been to Poland many times, and I know exactly what you mean. There are some places that are quite good. And I will say that the public transit in Warsaw is getting significantly better every time I go there. But other parts, it's very clear that after World War II, well, okay, certainly after the fall of the Berlin Wall, Poland was very much like, the US is great and we want to do everything they do. And they copy a lot of things from the US, from their culture. And traffic engineering was also one of those things.
Yes, that's very much true. And I would say, like, before this current political administration, Poland was probably the most pro-US country in the entire world. Like, more so even than Americans.
I would say so. Every time I went there, they were really, really, really pro-US in ways that other European countries were not.
Yes, and I think a lot of that has to do with the history and understanding that the US is one reason why they have their independence and freedom.
Of course.
And that might be changing a little bit now, but actually, sometimes when we would stop, I noticed people kind of staring at me sometimes. And I was like, well, I asked my co-drivers, why is everyone staring at me? And they said, well, you don't look Slavic, man. Like, they probably think you're American. And they don't see that many Americans in this particular part in Poland. So that was also interesting for me. This whole experience has taught me a lot about the history of these different countries, the cultures, the differences, and also the similarities and differences between the different Slavic cultures and ethnic groups. And especially when you cross that border from Poland into Ukraine, I will say that the traffic is fascinating to me because it's kind of like this time capsule of there's still a lot more Soviet legacy design. And you see things that make the US look like a mecca for safety by comparison sometimes. Like, there's on the way to Kiev, I'm not making this up, there are crosswalks across the highway.
Yeah, I've seen some of those.
Where 120 kilometer per hour traffic. And it's like, no one is going to stop. Actually, I wanted to make a YouTube video about it because I thought it's a great example of the insanity of crosswalks across, multiple lane roads. It's like, look, no one's going to stop on a highway because it's not intuitive to stop on a highway. You're traveling at high speeds.
But also, by the time you see somebody, it's probably too late to stop.
Exactly. And that's actually, I would also argue, mostly true in a lot of the urbanized road environments where cars are going 60, 80 kilometers an hour, and there's this three-lane road with a crosswalk across it. I would point out, I know that example in Ukraine is insane, but this situation we have here in the US, it's actually not that much different because if you hit at 80 kilometers per hour or 120 kilometers per hour, you're not surviving that. You're not going to have a good day, no matter which speed it is. So I thought, as someone involved in the urbanist community, I found it very interesting to see extreme examples like that. I felt like I learned a bit from that also. And then also watching the patterns of traffic in Kiev. So that's really when the impression was made upon me that it's the intersection that's the bottleneck, not the road, because in Kiev, you have lots of gridlock traffic and the roads are 5 or 6 lanes wide in every direction. Because of that, it's a gridlock because in every quarter of a mile, or I keep switching between miles and kilometers.
Apologies. Well, you are an American living in Europe, so I'm
doing my best, guys. But the point is, like, there's lots of gridlock. And when I tell people about what I do in Ukraine, a lot of them have asked me, could you stay and could you please fix our roads? Like, there's a common understanding there that the current situation isn't good.
Right.
And a lot of them are very eager for change.
Well, that would be a future discussion that it would be great to have when all of this is over, is about, like, how do you rebuild Ukraine and can you rebuild it better than it was before?
Yes. And I think also a really interesting point to it is that you don't have the same level of resistance to completely changing traffic because a lot of this stuff is seen as Soviet.
Right. Interesting.
Hey, this is a Soviet grid system. And especially now, there's a huge desire to get away from that. Also, something fascinating where I never expected my interest in history and cultures like this to then overlap with traffic engineering. And this is one reason I find transportation and traffic engineering so interesting, because it can be so much more interesting than just copying some level of service number in some handbook that somebody wrote 40 years ago.
Yeah, of course. Of course. So on these convoys, have they been mostly uneventful for you? Have you had any issues with them? You've done it 4 times now?
Yeah. Well, I will say the convoys are very well run and organized. The people behind it do a really good job. A lot of times we have convoy drivers who have done this for the first time.
Mhm.
So they do their best, but every once in a while, kind of a strange person might make their way through. But in the 4 times I've been there, nothing really bad has happened. One time, it was actually my first time, the trip took quite a long time because there was a blockade going on at the border.
Mm.
So this was a time when Kremlin agents were blocking the border between Poland and Ukraine, and they had a lot of like these grain trucks. So we had to like figure out in real time, where do we divert to avoid the roadblocks. And so 2 a.m. in the morning, you're driving through some like random Polish village of like 300 people, and it was just like, it felt like a time capsule. That was quite interesting for me. I would probably say the most memorable, I would say, or the biggest thing that happened to us was the second convoy. And after we arrived in Kiev, we were there for the attack on the children's hospital. I believe the hospital was Okhmatrit. I'm trying my best to pronounce it, but it's the largest children's hospital in Europe. And it was bombed in broad daylight. And unfortunately, I saw it myself with my own eyes and quickly figured out the kind of missile that was used, how it was obviously not a mistake. That has a lot to do with like the time of day. And these kind of weapons are pre-programmed. So the destination is already selected ahead of time. And yeah, just kind of seeing how people responded to that. And also just in general, seeing how people in Ukraine continue living their lives, even though they're getting bombed every day and there's no guarantee that you will make it the next day. But
Yeah.
after you've lived for more than 3 years of war, people just, they're like, look, I need to get a good night's sleep. I can't like wake up every 2 hours, 3 years in a row to go to a bomb shelter. And what's interesting is that it's fascinating seeing how this like ecosystem has grown a little bit, where an air alarm will go off on your phone and people check these specialized Telegram channels that then identify the exact threat, saying, okay, is this a threat to me? What's the form of the threat? And if it's something like, okay, Shahed drones have been detected, they're incoming towards your city, but they figure they won't be there for another 4 hours. So then people will go back to sleep for another 3 hours, and then they will then maybe go to the shelter if they want to, maybe an hour before they arrive, assuming they haven't all been shot down by that point. Or if it's something very serious, like an Iskander missile or a Kinjal missile, that people will take those a bit more seriously.
Wow.
And so they've kind of adapted to this whole threat. And I'm hesitant to say the word beautiful because I don't want people to think of it as positive, but it's really beautiful to see the adverse conditions people are living in, but still finding a way to continue with their life. And that's always been the inspiration for me to keep finding ways where I can be more and more helpful and to keep coming back over there. For me, it's just so inspiring to see it. And every time I was like, I want to stay, I wanted to keep doing more.
So how did you get involved in this stuff in the first place?
Well, let's see. All right. So I've been following this pretty much ever since the war escalated. I was very much one of those people who thought like there's no way Putin would be crazy enough to do something like this.
Right.
I grew up during the Iraq War. The American public was sold on this idea that we're bringing democracy to people, we're making the world a more stable place, like we're the good guys here. And then you grow up with this story that seems so obviously good. And then it turns out that, maybe we did a lot of wrong things that weren't so positive. And so I think there were a lot of Americans who kept on hearing these stories of like, we want to defend the Ukrainians, we want to defend democracy. And there was a bit of skepticism about, okay, I think that this is maybe being sold to us how conflicts in the past were sold to us.
Right.
And there wasn't really an understanding that actually this time it's different. This time, like there actually is a wolf and we're not just crying wolf. So when actually it happened, I kind of had the sense that history had really changed. And the thought that went through my mind was that ever since the end of the Second World War, there was this understanding and agreement that countries that were part of the international community never tried to outright conquer other nations. That had basically been no longer a thing. Like there were still civil wars, sometimes there were territorial disputes, but no country really tried to straight up annex another UN member state.
Right.
And that's basically what's at risk of happening here. And the reason I see it as so important is because we now live in a world with nuclear weapons, and Ukraine used to have nuclear weapons before they gave them up. And I think that if the world lets this happen, then many countries will take away from that the only way to protect themselves is to get their own nuclear weapons. So I think that we'll then go back to a world pre 1939, but now everyone has nuclear weapons because no one can trust the international community to ever protect them. And I have a very hard time imagining how that's a future scenario where humanity would survive.
Yeah.
And so for me, this has very much been a self-preservation thing. And that's kind of the logic that got me so involved, where I was really paying attention every day. I was donating. And then as time went on, I always assumed, the West's economy is so much bigger than Russia's. It's just going to be a matter of time before we outproduce them and crush them. And then some Western countries started playing politics with the aid. That's kind of a current political situation right now. And I kind of had this moment of, if you guys aren't going to do it, I'm going to go do it myself. And so that's how I got involved with 69th Sniffing Brigade, with bringing trucks over there. And then basically every time I delivered a truck, I just kept asking, like, what else can I do? Like, this doesn't feel like enough. And then that kind of actually peaked on the third convoy, where actually I came to the conclusion that my plan is to join the Ukrainian army, which I'm currently preparing for now, and I should be there sometime by the summer, because I always thought, what's the best thing I can do in my specific situation that can help the most?
Yeah.
And then it took me basically 6 or 7 months to get to that conclusion. And that's where I am now.
That's incredible. It's absolutely amazing that you've come originally from the US and then come to Europe, and now you're so deeply involved in what's going on in Ukraine. And I think one of the issues that sometimes is lost on people in North America is kind of how close this is to us, where we are here in the Netherlands.
Yeah. 2-hour flight.
Yeah, right? It's like a 2-hour flight. It's like if the front lines of Ukraine were in New York City.
Yeah.
The Netherlands is like in the Midwest,
Yep.
in Nebraska, in Dallas. It's like, it's not that far. And like you said, it really is a serious issue that we have sovereign nations invading others, because you're right. There was a time when we said, we're done doing that kind of thing.
Yeah.
That is not something that our societies do anymore. And, if Russia can invade Ukraine, then they can invade Poland too.
Yeah. So that's also a NATO country. So then that will then get a country like the United States directly involved. And I also try to point out to people that, we're not living in the 1800s anymore. The US is just 15 minutes away from Russia.
Yeah.
Because that's how long it takes a missile to go from, say, New York City to Moscow or something like that. So, yeah, I kind of call it the tyranny. We have the tyranny of distance, where it seems like we're very far away from these things, but they do affect us very much.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's serious stuff. And I know here in Europe, the war in Ukraine is treated extremely seriously, certainly more seriously than you will get in the American news, unfortunately, although the new administration making that even worse. Yeah, I mean, it's a serious issue here in Europe. We have to take it seriously because we have no other choice.
Yeah, I think speaking about the Netherlands specifically, maybe your non-Dutch viewers aren't aware of this, but there was a flight in 2014 that was shot down. That was a flight that went from Schiphol Airport.
Yeah.
There were a lot of Dutch nationals on that plane, and I believe the casualties for Dutch people was somewhere north of 100. And so a lot of people in the Netherlands knew someone who had a family member or a loved one on that flight. And it's a big reason why the Netherlands especially, even though they're such a small country, has done relatively a lot percentage-wise. The Netherlands has so far been one of the few countries has sent fighter jets, their own F-16s, to the war zone. The United States has not sent any yet.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's so frustrating to hear the American news pretending that the Europeans aren't doing anything. It's ridiculous. But yeah, you're talking about that flight MH17, the Malaysian Airlines flight that was shot down by a surface-to-air missile by the Russians. They say, it was a mistaken identity. But yeah, there were an awful lot of Dutch nationals on that plane. And that had absolutely massive repercussions across the Netherlands. after that happened.
Yeah, and then it kind of goes to show that this is not a faraway conflict for Europe. I mean, this war has already killed many Europeans.
Yeah.
And they're even having issues. The Kaliningrad Oblast, that's like that little island of land that belongs to Russia that's sandwiched between Poland and Lithuania.
Yeah.
They are trying to jam a lot of the air traffic control signals in the Baltic region. So it's actually quite a big hazard for civilian air traffic flying between the Netherlands and, say, the Baltic countries, or from countries like Norway and Sweden. And yeah, it's very close. And that was always something that was strange for me, because I would come back from these trips and it's a 2-hour flight. And even though it is close, it sometimes feels like when you're just living your day-to-day life, it's still two completely separate worlds. So like when I worked my job in the Netherlands, it's such a strange experience coming from a country where your air alert app is going off every couple of hours.
Right.
Coming back to a completely normal civilian life in the Netherlands, where the most dangerous thing is Oma on our buckfeast is going to run you over because she doesn't care. She has places to be. And yeah, it's kind of something that kind of kept pulling me back. And there are really a lot of organizations in the Netherlands that do a lot to support Ukraine. If I can maybe highlight a few of them, there is one called Dutch Civilian Action, and they're regular Dutch civilians, and they go to the front line to support the civilians who are actually still living there. So they talk to them, they try to bring direct humanitarian aid to them. And I got to know them through a local chapter of a group I work at called the Razom. I can spell that out for you later if you'd like, Jason.
Well, we'll put some links in the show notes in the description here too, so that people can check these out for themselves.
Yes, the Dutch word is stichting. It's basically like a charity that's...
official organization, if you will.
Yeah, and it supports Ukrainian refugees in Haarlem. I mean, there are a lot of these local charity groups, not just in the Netherlands, but all over the world. And I would encourage people listening, see if there's one of those organizations close to you. And they almost always need volunteers, especially as time goes on, because always in the beginning of conflicts like this, there's a lot of interest and it kind of slowly tapers off over time. So if you want to make a difference, especially reaching out now when some time has passed, you can probably make a big difference.
Right. So you are currently doing a fundraiser right now, right, for another one of these trucks?
Yes. So I ended up telling my brother about my decision to join the army a few months ago, and he'd always been interested in helping Ukraine. But when he heard that, he decided to come on one of these convoy trips with me. So my fourth trip, my brother and I drove a truck together. We were stuck in the same car for 34 hours, but,
How did that go?
We made it there in one piece, but I was like, if you can get through this, you can get through anything. And actually, I will say it's also very helpful if you have a bigger enemy outside of your truck. Like if you ever want to keep the peace inside of a vehicle on a road trip, like having an imminent threat looming over your head, that does a lot to boost camaraderie.
Good to remember. Not sure how I can apply that to family road trips, but, well, we usually take the train anyway.
True that. And yes, so after the fourth trip, the 69th Sniffing Brigade, or Help 99, how it works is that the fundraisers are hosted by individuals all over the world. And how it works is that they create patches where if you want to fundraise for a truck, Help 99 will make a customized patch of your design. You send them a design, they make a patch out of it. And these patches are made in Ukraine by Ukrainians. And if somebody donates over 100 euros to this campaign, they will get this customized patch sent to them. And then you can put it on your clothes, on your backpack, you can put it on your whiteboard, you can do anything you want with it. There's also more benefits if you donate more. So for example, you can put the flag of your country on the truck, you could put customized text on the truck, like screw Putin or something like that. You can name your truck. We're going to be naming ours Sanctions on Wheels. Yeah, so my brother and I, we decided to fundraise for a truck, a Havoc drone, and then night vision equipment for the 25th Brigade. If you guys Google map it, there's a city called Pokrovsk in the Donetsk region in Ukraine, and that's where a lot of the fighting is happening right now. And yeah, we're in direct contact with the soldiers who need the truck, and it's really motivating because you can see how it's needed. And yes, so this is my third fundraiser I've done, but this is my brother's first. And so we're calling it the Bear Battalion because our last name is Bear. And I really hope that Jason will put a link that fundraiser in the description.
Oh, definitely. I already put a YouTube community post about it, but those are at the whims of the YouTube algorithm as to whether you see them or not.
Yes.
But I'll definitely put that link in the show notes. I see that you're doing pretty well, but you're not quite there yet. You're trying to raise, what is I see here, 24,700 euros, and you're currently a little over 18,000.
Yeah, we're just at about 75%. We usually get around 25% every week. So yeah, we're hoping that it does slow down over time.
Yep.
So we're hoping to do one extra boost. We're also doing a side fundraiser for equipment that Help 99 can't provide on their own. So things like MREs, meals ready to eat,
Right.
some specific devices that are night vision compatible. We're doing a private fundraiser to do that. But because this one goes through my own private bank account, and so we try to market that more towards people who actually know me, because we
Right.
want people to understand it's legit. And I understand if someone doesn't know us and then we just send them a bank account number, it's maybe, a little, some people might treat that a little, and deservedly so, they might treat that a little skeptically. So that's
Right.
why we try to push the Help 99 fundraiser as much as possible.
Very good. Well, I'll definitely put that in the show notes, and hopefully you can raise the full amount before you and your brother are off to Ukraine again. And yeah, so then what's next after that? You talked a little bit about it, but what's next after this truck?
Well, so I'm hoping my brother will continue to do some fundraisers. I'm always happy to support him. My own plan is to be there in summertime to officially enlist. The plan is to be a drone pilot. I don't know the specific unit either, but my goal is actually to keep making content and to keep posting.
Right.
Because I'm really hoping that maybe what I'm doing can maybe inspire some people to find their own way to get more involved. I think that by sharing my stories and by drawing attention to what's going on there in a responsible way, that can do a lot to attract a lot more fundraising, a lot more attention. And also every once in a while, seeing if we can find a way to bring urbanism into
Right.
it. So like talking about, hey guys, I'm in this little village in Eastern Ukraine. Like, let's talk about traffic for a little bit. And so I haven't started it yet, but I'm going to make a second YouTube channel called Stef Goes to Ukraine, where I'm going to try to make short form content for people. And if I can ever find maybe a traffic theme I can talk about, I'll still be uploading to the Build the Lanes YouTube channel.
Very good. Well, I wish you the best of luck. It's unbelievable what you've already done to help out and what you're going to be doing. And I'm happy to promote what you're doing for sure. So anyway, if you are interested in helping out in any way or donating, the links are in the show notes. And yeah, any final thoughts there before we go?
I would just say what they say over in Ukraine when they are saluting the people fighting. So one side says, Slava Ukraini.
Slava Ukraini.
And everyone else responds with Heroyam Slava. So it means glory to Ukraine, and you respond with glory to the heroes.
Very good. All right. Thanks so much for coming on, Stef. It's great to talk to you as usual, and best of luck with everything. We will be following your adventures for sure.
Thank you guys. And also thank you to all of you guys listening and making this podcast happen. You guys are awesome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to the Urbanist Agenda. As usual, all new episodes will be available early on Nebula. So if you're not already a Nebula subscriber, now might be a good time. You can sign up at nebula.tv/agenda. And with a subscription to Nebula, you not only support this podcast, you also get access to content by over 150 creators. That's everything from videos to podcasts to classes and more. Nebula is also constantly adding new Nebula originals, which are high-budget productions on a wide range of interesting topics. If you use our link, which again is nebula.tv/agenda, you'll get a discount on a yearly subscription, which brings it down to only $30 a year. I'm a big fan of Nebula, which is why all of my Not Just Bikes videos are available there, as well as some that are only available on Nebula, and of course, all episodes of the Urbanist Agenda. So if you're not already a Nebula subscriber, go check it out today, and thanks again for listening.